Welcome to ARE Live. I'm Mark Tier, the founder and CEO here at Black Spectacles. I'm joined with our producer, Patrick Finnegan, and architect, Chris Hopstock, who's going to review several construction and evaluation mock exam questions. We're going to go through questions that cover CE knowledge and skills related to assisting clients in selecting contractors, assisting owners in preparing owner-contractor agreements, and knowledge of principles of value engineering, everyone's favorite subject. So it should be a great session. If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is a leader in architecture test prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you remember it so that you pass on the first try. We've built everything that you need to pass the exams, including our new video lectures with motion graphics and 3D animation, practice exams that are as close to the real thing as you can get, flashcards, quizzes, and virtual workshops. And they're all built upon a curriculum that ensures you're learning the right content, and they all work together with our custom-built learning software to ensure that you remember the information for the exams. That's why our pass rates are 50% higher than the national average, and why our members report passing in half the time of the national average. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more Black Spectacles, you can just visit blackspectacles.com. And if you're ready to get started studying, stick around to the end of today's episode so you can take advantage of our discount for individual memberships. I have two cool things that we're working on that I wanted to mention to you today. The first is that we are developing a first ever product advisory board where we're just looking for a handful of our members to engage with our team here and our product development team to provide feedback and contribute essentially back to the architecture community. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in learning more about or interested in being considered for, can you send me an email and just let me know? My email is mark@blackspectacles.com. So just send me a note if you'd be interested in participating in the product advisory board and so forth. We can share a little more information about it with you, and then invite you to be considered for that advisory board. So so far the response has been awesome, and so we do have a couple of seats that are we're still looking to fill here before the end of the year. So again, just send me an email, mark@blackspectacles.com. That's MARC. The second thing I want to mention to you is as we are always working on iterating on our products as well as developing new ones, we have a handful of voiceover artists that we are currently evaluating for our next course, and we would love your feedback on who you like the best. And so I believe that there is a link inside of your dashboard when you log into Black Spectacles, but I'm grabbing the link from one of my colleagues here, and momentarily I'll share that over in the community where we have everything. In fact, I think it looks like Patrick already added it to our ARE community for today's post. So it's really simple. I think there's 4 different, short samples. Each one's like 60 seconds of 4 different people. And if you can just, fill out the survey and let us know which one you prefer, it would help us and it would help you because it will help, basically we're going to follow the lead of whatever, whoever you guys want to listen to, because I know it's a lot of hours that you're listening to these folks. So those are the 2 things I wanted to add. We talk about this on a regular basis, but I want to remind you that over on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, we regularly post mock exam questions. So if you don't already follow us, I would suggest that you do. We are at Black Spectacles. On Instagram and TikTok, we're at black.spectacles. And then on Facebook, we're just Black Spectacles. So you can find us at these 3 handles. Our next ARE Live session will be January 15th of 2025, where we'll be covering how to become a licensed architect in 2025. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up. Should be a good topic. I'm sure many of you know how to become a licensed architect. So one thing to think about, especially with the end of year kind of happening, if you know somebody who has talked about getting licensed and maybe they're not exactly sure how to do it, or maybe you even think they might be intimidated to kind of get going. We're going to talk about how, but also why to become a licensed architect in 2025. Spoiler alert, it has a big impact on the amount of money you make as an architect. Is one of the, I don't want to say the main reason, but it's definitely a big reason. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 other great reasons, but that's the one I always like to remind people of. So anyways, would encourage you to share the link to this episode to make sure your friends and colleagues participate in that, so they get kind of a good lay of the land about why and how to become a licensed architect in 25. Let's see. Let's talk about referral programs. We offer a referral program for firms and schools, where if you introduce us to your boss or whoever makes the decisions at your firm, and if the firm signs up, we'll provide you with a $250 gift card. So to participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. We also offer a refer a friend program, where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership, and then you receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they redeem. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. So that's 2 different group referral programs. So again, if you're spreading the word, you might as well make sure you get paid doing it. We're going to be engaging exclusively on our online ARE community today. So head over to community.blackspectacles.com, and right at the top, you'll see we've pinned a thread called ARE Live CE Mock Exam December 2024. If you have a question as we're going through ARE Live today, please post your question there. And of course, we'll answer your question there. But also, everyone who posts in that thread today will be eligible to win a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. Like literally all you have to do is go to that link and say hello, and you're instantly registered. And of course, don't forget to stick around to the end of the episode to see if you've won. We've mentioned this a number of times this year, but something that Patrick and I put together going back to the spring is we developed licensure stories. It's a podcast. You can find it on our ARE community. It's also on YouTube and then your favorite podcasting service. So it's on Google and Apple Podcasts, as well as Spotify. So again, it's on all the main things. It's really cool. I basically have the opportunity to interview recently licensed architects, and the stories that people share are just awesome. Sometimes those stories are stories of perseverance and, someone who took 25 years to get licensed, and had everything kind of go against them. In some cases, people can get licensed in 6 weeks. Like, the stories are all over the place. My favorite question I always ask is, what did you do to celebrate? So the worst case scenario, you get some good ideas for how to celebrate once you get your license. But as you're going through the journey, I think it really helps to kind of put all this in context and be reminded, hey, you're not the only one going through this, and you can learn from all of your peers. So I'd encourage you to check those out. All right, I think we're all set up here. With that, I'd like you to welcome today's guest, Chris Hopstock. In addition to working with us here at Black Spectacles, Chris is an architect based in New York. And welcome back, Chris.
Thanks, Mark. I'm happy to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I think construction admin is probably my favorite phase of any project. I think it's super cool. You get to see the results of all your design efforts. You get to help problem solve on the site, get out of the office, and you're going to meet people from totally different walks of life than you normally would. You'll be talking to plumbers about where to best put these pipes, and all sorts of folks that you probably wouldn't meet if you were sitting in your architecture office. That said, CE is kind of a strange exam. If you just look at the ARE guidelines, they really suggest that CE is all about construction admin procedures like pay apps and certificates of substantial completion, how to respond to RFIs and things like that. None of the resources that are listed for the exam actually talk about construction itself. But if you think about it logically, in order for you to evaluate construction, right, you obviously need some construction experience. So there's going to be questions like questions that we're going to cover today that have a hint of construction knowledge that you're going to need to know to be able to accurately answer that question. So whenever I hear questions like, when should I take the CE exam, I think the answer really depends on your experience level with those construction related topics. I think if you're a younger architect, I would probably say take CE last. I think it's I think it's helpful to have studied for PA through PDD and to get the experience under your belt that way. And I think if you're a more experienced architect, you've been working in the field for a few years, I would probably recommend taking it early on and grouping it with the more professional practice exams like PCM and PJM because of the overlap with contracts. So with that said, these questions we're going to cover today are going to kind of cover the full gamut of the types of questions you might see on the CE exam, including some of these construction topics. So let's jump into question 1. All right, an architect is working on a project that is over budget, and the CM is investigating areas where the project can benefit from value engineering. One proposal is to revise the handrail/guardrail assembly at the exterior ramps. The CM has submitted a value engineering proposal that includes the following: change the handrail guardrail from steel to aluminum, minor changes in the profiles, and changes to the mounting method. Which of the following should the architect review when determining if the proposed product meets the client's needs and the project's requirements? Check the 4 that apply, and we've got choice A, the proposed supplier's references, B, compliance with accessibility requirements, C, the aluminum guardrails MSDS or material safety data sheet, D, the IBC required structural stability, E, compliance with IBC opening limitations, and finally F, the aesthetic differences between the steel and aluminum guardrail. So this question might seem kind of simple at first glance. We're just asking what should you consider when you're trying to make a judgment about this proposed substitution. But in order to answer this question, you've really got to have some understanding of accessibility, the International Building Code, what maybe the difference is between aluminum and steel. You've got to know what a handrail guardrail assembly is, so that you know what types of things you would consider when designing and evaluating one. And of course, you've got to understand the CA procedures about evaluating a substitution. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of these answer choices and start to narrow it down. So choice A, the proposed supplier's references. I think this could be a reasonable choice. It's the first one we're seeing. I think if I was taking the exam, I would probably mark it and come back to it later. I want to see what the other choices are and see if there's any better choices out there. So let's do that for now. Choice B, accessibility requirements. I would say that's absolutely a correct answer here. The question's mentioning minor changes in the profiles. I know it says minor, but the handrail cross sections that you need to comply with in ANSI A117.1 are super specific. So even just a minor change in that could put you out of compliance with accessibility requirements. So I'm going to mark that as a correct answer. Choice C, the aluminum guardrails material safety data sheet. So this is incorrect. And this is kind of a CA procedure that would make you know that this is incorrect, is that you should never be reviewing material safety data sheets. If you receive these as part of a submittal, you should mark them as not reviewed and return them to the contractor that submitted them. These sheets talk about potential hazards associated with materials. So what chemically is in them and what maybe you should think about if you're going to be handling the materials. It's not your pure purview as an architect. If you have a paper trail of reviewing these, you could be maybe considered getting into the contractor's means and methods, and it's just not a good place to be. So definitely incorrect. If you see anything on the ARE asking you to review MSDS, that's going to be incorrect. All right, choice D, the IBC structural stability requirements. Definitely, I would say that that's something you should look at. The mounting method is being changed here, so you want to make sure that the new mounting method can meet code. I would probably say that you should discuss this with the structural engineer. So that's definitely a correct answer to this one. Choice E, compliance with IBC opening limitations. So here's where you kind of need to know about what handrails and guardrails are doing. So specifically a guardrail has to be solid enough that it's going to prevent people from falling through it. A guardrail is meant to protect you from falling off like a balcony or a stair or a ramp landing in this case. So it's got to be solid enough that it can do that, but also there's some openness allowed. So You're allowed to, guardrails cannot allow the passage of a 4-inch sphere. So if we're talking about changing profiles of a guardrail here, it's possible that the new guardrail might not comply with those requirements, and it's definitely worth checking. So that's going to be correct for this one. And finally, choice F, aesthetic differences between steel and aluminum. I would say absolutely. We're changing materials and also profiles. Aluminum rails tend to be chunkier than steel rails, and that's one of the reasons that you would want to use steel instead of aluminum. So I would certainly check that the new proposed guardrail is going to meet your design intent when evaluating this proposed substitution. So with that, we've got 4 correct answers, and the question's looking for 4 correct answers. Those are B, D, E, and F. And we said we were going to come back to choice A at the beginning, which we've now determined is incorrect. So let's just talk about that one for a second. Proposed suppliers references. You do, as the architect, have the ability to voice concern about a potential subcontractor according to A201. I would say it's not the best answer for this question simply because we're talking about a handrail supplier here. It's a pretty small part of the overall project. If this was talking about changing a superstructure contractor or one of the major subs on a project, I would say definitely check some references, make sure that they've got a good reputation in the area. But if you start checking references for every single supplier on a project, you're going to be on the phone checking references all day. So I would say it's just not one of the best answers to this question, given the other 4 correct answers that we determined. And you're going to see that a lot on all of the ARE divisions, is that you're often expected to choose the best answer in a given situation. And I think we've done that here. So with that, I think we can move on to question 2.
Yeah, and in between here, just a reminder to everyone, a couple quick things. If you have a question for Chris, post it here in our ARE community. It's the post, or I should say it's the thread that's live or that's pinned at the top of community.blackspectacles.com. So if you have questions, throw them in there. We have one, but I'm going to hold that one for the end. So keep them coming.
Sounds good. I always look forward to the Q&A. All right, so question 2, an architect is working on a design, negotiate, build project and has contracted with the owner using the AIA B101. At the end of the contract documents phase, the project manager is reviewing the firm's contractual obligations with firm leadership before proceeding to the next phase of the project. Which of the following is a responsibility of the architect during the next phase of the project as part of their basic services? A, conduct a pre-bid conference. B, consider requests for substitutions. C, conduct opening of the bids. Or D, prepare responses to questions from prospective contractors. So firstly, I just want to say that I think a lot of people associate the B101 with design, bid, build only, but the B101 can be used with both design, negotiate, build, and design, bid, build. So you've got to be careful reading this question. If you read it quickly, you're going to read design, negotiate, build in the first line, and then you'll read AIA B101 afterwards, and you might kind of forget that we're talking about design, negotiate, build here. So this is just a good plug to maybe use the highlighting tool and highlight design, negotiate, build when you come across it in the question, and just to not rush through reading through the questions because these details matter. Just a quick difference between these two things. Design, bid, build just simply means that you're publicly bidding the project. It's often used on publicly funded project. It's a requirement that those be publicly bid in order to get the best pricing and also to be fair and allow any qualified contractors the chance to win the project. And design, negotiate, build can be generally used on privately funded projects when the owner wants to just submit the design drawings to a select group of contractors, get their proposed prices on the project and negotiate with them privately. So it's more of a closed situation where only a few contractors are trying to be awarded the project. So with that information, we can kind of just eliminate choice A and choice C right off the bat if we know that, because a design, negotiate, build project will not have a pre-bid conference and there will be no opening of the bids because we're not doing bidding. So We can, just with that knowledge, make this a 50-50 question where we're choosing between choice B and choice D. So let's look at those potential choices here. Choice B, consider requests for substitutions. That's actually an additional service. You can certainly do that during a design, negotiate, bid, design, negotiate, build project, but it's an additional service, not basic service, according to the B101 Article 3. So that's going to be incorrect here. So that leaves us with the correct choice D, prepare responses to questions from prospective contractors. This is basically just answering prospective contractors' RFIs. It's a basic service, and when you do answer questions, if you should, just like with a design bid build project, you should give that answer to all prospective contractors so that it's still a level playing field. It's still the right thing to do in that situation. So this is just a good example of a question where you can narrow it down pretty quickly if you read the question carefully. You've also got to be careful at the end there that you're reading. The question is asking about as part of your basic services. So you could get caught up between B and D if you're not considering what's basic service and what's an additional service, and if you haven't internalized what those things are in the standard AIA contracts. All right, I think we can move on to question 3. The owner of a large commercial project is negotiating their contract with the contractor, which will use the AIA A101 and AIA A201 as guides. The architect and owner have contracted with each other using the AIA B101, so we're using the standard suite of AIA contracts. The owner notifies the architect that the contractor has proposed the following revision to AIA A201, section 4.2.2, and it reads, the architect will visit the site monthly to determine if the work is in accordance with the contract documents. The architect will produce field observation reports within 1 week of each site visit. Such reports shall describe any defects discovered and, in the absence of such defects, shall approve the work as constructed. How should the architect respond? A, negotiate a supplemental service fee with the owner. B, inform the owner that this revision does not align with your firm's contractual responsibilities. Or C, accept the proposed revision to the A201. So this is kind of a classic question about changing a standard agreement and how you should address that proposed change. You could also see this type of a question in PCM or PJM for that matter. The good news about this type of question is that for the purposes of the ARE, changing an AIA contract is pretty much never going to be okay. So that pretty much eliminates choice C right off the bat here. And again, we've just with one piece of knowledge turned this from in this case, select 3 question to a 2-choice 50-50 question. So you're deciding between accepting this change for more money or letting the owner know that your contract doesn't allow for this change, so they'd kind of be holding the bag if they accept the change. You've got to remember some important things here. Your contract, their contract with the contractor cannot create an additional responsibility for you as the architect. You're not a party to the A101, and the A201 is not even a contract, but anyway, you're not a party to the owner contractor agreement. So nothing that's written in there can create an obligation for you. You should also know that B101 Article 5.1.3 requires the owner to coordinate the architect services noted in the construction contract with the B101. That's protecting you in a situation like this where maybe the owner doesn't run this by you and this just gets put into the contract for construction and you're unaware. So this puts the onus on the owner to make sure that the construction contract is saying you're going to do things that you're actually contractually responsible to do. So with that, there's a couple of issues with this revised language. First off, monthly site visits. The A201 in its unedited version says that you'll perform site visits at intervals appropriate with the course of the work, which is kind of open-ended. Some owners and some contractors don't like that. It makes sense because there's not always something new for you to see. Some parts of the project move faster than others, so intervals appropriate to the stage of work leaves it open-ended for the project team to determine when you should be out there and when it's going to be reasonable. So I'm always a little bit leery of agreeing to some sort of like predetermined time frame for site visits for that reason, but also because it could be viewed as creating sort of an oversight situation where you're maybe considered to be managing some part of the construction and you can't put yourself in that situation. That's purely the contractor's responsibility. So monthly site visits, not great in this proposed change, but the main issue really in this proposed language is at the end, where it talks about approving such work as constructed. The architect should never be approving work. Certainly, you're not going to approve work and then write a report saying that you approved the work and create some paper trail. Architects are meant to be observing the work. They document their findings, and they will, in those documented field reports, include nonconformities that they observed. So I would say there's two issues with this proposed language, the second one being kind of a deal breaker, honestly. So your best bet here would be to let the owner know that this does not align with your contract and that they should not accept this wording. And that is choice B, which is the correct answer here. Ultimately, you can't make the owner not accept this choice. You can just advise them that, you know, even though this agreement might say that, that's not what you're going to be providing, and there's kind of a gap in your scope of work there. All right, let's move it on to question 4 about commissioning. An architect is working on a project where the owner requires commissioning of the mechanical and electrical systems, as well as the exterior envelope insulation and air sealing systems. The owner has hired a commissioning agent to perform the task. Which of the following submittals should the architect require review from the commissioning agent? Check the 3 that apply. I'm not going to read the master spec numbers here because they're kind of irrelevant. So we'll just read what the actual submittal is. Choice A, heating and cooling unit covers. Choice B, heat tracing for plumbing piping. C, plumbing piping insulation. D, lighting control devices, color chart. E, radiators, and F, engine generators. So this is another question about a CA process reviewing submittals, but you really need to know a little bit about what these things are so that you can answer the question. You know, if you don't know what heat tracing for plumbing piping is, it's going to be hard for you to determine if it should be reviewed, given the parameters that were given in the question. And the reason this question makes sense is the architect is often the responsible person to determine who on the project team is going to review submittals. So you'll find yourself in this situation a lot throughout your construction administration journey. So just looking at the question again, we're talking about commissioning of the mechanical, electrical, and envelope systems only. Those are the key terms in the question. And I would highlight those if I was taking the exam. And so we're going to go through each of these choices and determine if they are part of those systems. So option 1 here, heating and cooling unit covers. I think this is probably a good choice here. I would mark it as correct, at least until I go through the other choices. The reason that this could be, or probably is correct, is that unit covers can affect the airflow and the operation of a unit. There's usually required airflow through any type of mechanical or heating and cooling unit that must be met. So especially if you're putting some sort of custom cover or custom enclosure on any of these things, it should be reviewed to make sure that it's allowing for the proper airflow so that these units can operate properly. So I'm pretty sure that that's correct. I would mark it correct on the exam. B, heat tracing for piping. So this is an electrical component. Heat tracing is simply a heated wire that gets wrapped around plumbing piping to keep it from freezing. It's often used in like maybe garages, which are unconditioned. If you've got any piping running through there and you want to be extra sure that they're not going to freeze, you can put some heat trace line on it. So it's electrical in nature, but it's really part of the plumbing system. So I'm going to say that it's not correct here because we're not commissioning the plumbing system. I think if you're thinking that maybe this is correct, you would also go down the line of thought that an electric hot water heater is an electrical item, and I think it just gets too messy. So this is really part of a plumbing system, and we're going to say not correct here. Choice C kind of follows a similar logic, plumbing piping installation. The word insulation is in there, and it's also in the question itself. So if you're kind of rushing, you might see insulation and just mark this correct, but the plumbing piping insulation is not part of the exterior envelope. Obviously, it's just meant to insulate the piping, keep things from condensing, keep hot water pipes hot and things like that. So I'm going to say that that one is incorrect. Choice D, lighting control devices, color chart. If it wasn't the color chart, I would say this definitely should be reviewed. It's part of the electrical system, right? So it helps if you've done some CA and you've seen these color charts and you realize that literally all you're reviewing on those is you're choosing a color. It doesn't have any technical information. So a commissioning agent typically will not review these. It's not going to affect the operation of any of the of any product that you're reviewing a color chart for. Choice E, radiators. I would say, of course, that's a major mechanical component to keep the building warm in colder months. So it's a really common system to be commissioned. You obviously want to make sure that that's working right before a building is turned over to an owner. And also engine generator. That's like an emergency generator. It's an electrical system. And that's definitely a major piece of electrical component that should be commissioned. These things don't run all the time. They're just going to come on in an emergency. So you want to make sure that it's actually going to work like it's supposed to in the event of an emergency. So a really important item to be commissioned, especially in like maybe a hospital or some like critical building where power outages can literally be a life safety issue. So with that, we've got correct choices A, E, and F here. And just another fun question where it's about a CA process, but without knowing what these things are, if you haven't studied for PPD and PDD and aren't fully confident in your MEP systems, you're going to have a hard time answering this question. All right, and that leaves us with our last question here, number 5. A project manager is about to enter the closeout phase of a project for their first time, and they ask a more senior project manager for a checklist of items that need to be completed in this phase. The more senior project manager says that the firm has a checklist that covers all of the basic services required at project closeout. Which of the following should be included on the checklist? Check the 2 that apply. A, issue final as-built drawings. B, archive project files. C, issue certificate of substantial completion. D, submit final invoice to the owner. E, issue certificate of final completion. And F, perform a post-occupancy evaluation. So we're talking about the closeout phase at the very end of a project. And another key term here is basic services. We just want things that are included in our basic services. And you'll kind of see that a lot in questions where a question is just talking about basic services, because if it was open-ended and the project could include any variety of additional or supplemental services, it's going to be hard to answer the question. So the question needs to kind of like narrow down the situation for you, and an easy way of doing that is to say we're just talking about basic services. So keep that in mind again and highlight that. Let's go through these choices. So choice A, issue final as-built drawings. As-builts are an additional services. Since we're talking about basic services here, they shouldn't be included in this checklist, and that's going to be an incorrect answer. I would say architects aren't the best people to make as-builts regardless of the situation, and definitely not as constructed as-built. Architects don't manage the construction. It's kind of impossible for you to be aware of every single change that was made on the project. So I kind of advise not to get involved with as-built drawings as an architect. I think if you want to do an as-designed record drawings, that's one thing. That's kind of compiling all of your addenda and your sketches and things like that into one final document. That's one thing, but as-built gets into a tricky situation with managing means and methods and things like that. So that's an incorrect choice here. B, archiving the project's files. Definitely. It's an important closeout item. It's good to take the time to do that at the end of a project for a couple of reasons. You want to be able to find things when they're needed on this project in 2 months when somebody's looking for something or the owner has a question. You want to be able to easily find that. You also want to have your project files neat because maybe you'll want to reference them for a future project. And You want to follow your firm standards on how to do that so that some other person in your office can find things like a submittal for the windows on that project. So it's definitely good to take the time to do that at project closeout, and I would say that's a correct choice here. Certificate of substantial completion. So this is something an architect does as part of their basic services, but you're not going to be doing this at project closeout. The certificate of substantial completion can happen significantly earlier in a project. It depends what's agreed upon and when the owner wants to start occupying the project or a portion of the project. So for that reason, it's not a closeout item. I don't think it meets the requirements of this question for a project closeout checklist. So I'm going to say that that's not correct. D, the final invoice to the owner. Absolutely, you need to get paid. This is the best time to submit your final invoice. You're about to finish the project. You don't want to submit it 2 months later. You probably don't want to submit it early. Now is the time to do a final invoice and really close out the project's books, so to speak, and get all of the finances squared away. We'll also probably be paying your final invoices from all of your consultants. So you want the money from your final check from the owner to be able to do that because you're generally paying your consultants once you're paid by the owner. So that's definitely correct here. Choice E, issue a certificate of final completion. This is a trick answer because no such thing exists. So, and this is a common misconception. So final completion is not the same as substantial completion in that the architect does not issue the certificate saying that the project is finally complete. It's kind of a liability thing. Like, how can you be totally sure that the project is finally complete, that the contractor's done everything that they were supposed to do? You can, saying something is substantially complete is different and kind of more open-ended, but for that reason, there's no certificate of final completion. Typically, the final certified pay app is kind of a signifier that the project is finally complete, and that's the mechanism that you'll use to close out a project with the contractor. And finally, perform a post-occupancy evaluation. That is an additional or supplemental service, depending on when you agreed to do it. And therefore, this question is asking about basic services, so it is an incorrect choice here. So that leaves us with our 2 correct answers, which are B, archive your project files, and D, submit your final invoice to the owner. And that's all I've got. Those are 5 pretty common question types that you can see on the CE division of the ARE. As you can see, if you just read, the Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice or some books on professional practice, you're not going to be able to answer some of these questions because of the additional knowledge and experience that you would need to really be able to do this. And like I said, I think that makes sense for this exam. That it's called the Construction and Evaluation Exam, and it's kind of hard to evaluate construction without having that knowledge. So with that, I think we'll open it up to any questions, Mark.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Chris. I think the main question that we have here goes back to the comments you made about AIA contracts. The question specifically says, can you elaborate a little bit on why proposing revisions to AIA contracts is usually wrong?
Yeah, that's a good one. And this is kind of a situation where real life practice can differ from what the ARE says to do. So in my experience as an architect, I worked primarily on projects in New York City with real estate developers. We never used AIA contracts. They were foreign to me when I started studying for the ARE. So you can imagine my surprise when I read in all these books that you just have to use the AIA contracts and never change them. I was like, what are we doing at this firm? So it doesn't align with real practice, but the AIA contracts are very specific. They've been written and reviewed by a team of lawyers. They've been exhibits in numerous lawsuits in all of the states. There's case law about what these contracts say. So if you get into a situation with a contentious situation, litigation or arbitration or something, there's more certainty if you're using the language in those documents, because chances are somebody's been in that situation before. Some judge has ruled on it, or a jury's ruled on it, or an arbitrator, and you kind of, it's just a little bit more clear what might happen. So that saves time and money, attorney money. there's also, so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that the documents say what they say for good reason. You know, people have gone through these and they've decided that we're not going to say monthly site visits, for example, because that's a little bit too constricting on the architect. Maybe maybe there's a really good reason, like I was talking about, where monthly could be construed as the architect being some sort of a project manager and like overseeing things for the contractor, and that can get weird. So basically what I'm saying is there's a really good reason for all the language in those documents. If you're going to change something, you should have a very good reason to do it. There's also an area on all of these contracts to include additional stipulations. It's typically at the end of the agreements. If you've got a unique situation, you can add something in there, and that's a good way to do something, especially on the ARE, where you're adding things, you're not just simply changing wording.
Beautiful. One more here. Let's see. There was a question regarding whose responsibility, and this goes back to sort of, one of the quiz questions, but it relates to this. There was a question regarding whose responsibility it is to make record drawings. The correct answer per the quiz was that the contractor was. And the question is, aren't architects responsible for making record drawings based on as-builts received from the contractor? Can you confirm and clarify that one?
This is another good one. I hear this one a lot, and I do know we have some questions about this because it's a really important topic. So I don't know the A201 article off the top of my head that covers it, but I could certainly look it up. But the A201 talks about the contractor needing to compile all of the conditions into a set of drawings, and it doesn't use the word as-built, but it kind of describes as-built drawings. So it says that the contractor is responsible for that without using the word. So I can find the article that covers that, but it's in there. The other place that people get tripped up is that as-built are a possible additional or supplemental service in the B101. So, it says that an architect can do that, and I'm not disagreeing, they can. But without any additional or supplemental services, without changing any agreements, it is the contractor's responsibility in A201. If the architect is hired to do one of those things, the contractor wouldn't need to do it because the architect is doing it. Like I was saying, for one of these questions, a lot of questions, there's a preface that we're talking about unmodified standard AAA agreements. So you should always approach a question if it doesn't say that and it doesn't say anything about a modification, just work within the realm of the standard AAA agreements, which say that that's the contractor's responsibility.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. I think that brings our questions to a close for now. So, as always, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for everything you do to support the architecture community.
Yeah, thanks. Great. It was great doing this again.
Awesome. Our next ARE Live will be on January 15th of 2025, where we'll be covering how to become, not just how, but how and why to become a licensed architect in 2025. As I mentioned earlier, again, I would encourage you, many of you probably already know how and why to become a licensed architect, but you probably have some colleagues and friends who maybe don't, or maybe they're a little unsure or need a little push or a little encouragement. So I'd encourage you to grab the link over at blackspectacles.com/podcast and share it with your friends. And of course, you're all welcome to join as well. If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is a leader in ARE prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you remember it so that you pass on the first try. Something I mentioned that's a little bit, two new things I mentioned that are kind of fun at the outset was, number one, we are developing a product advisory board that I'd encourage you to consider joining. It's just a handful of people, so we're looking for, I think we have a number of the seats already filled. I think we're just looking for a couple more people. If you would be interested in sharing your feedback on on our products and services and how we can improve them and what you like about them and so on and so forth, send me an email. Mark@blackspectacles.com. That's MARC@blackspectacles.com. Send me a quick note. Let me know you're interested, and I'll connect you up with my colleague Kiara, who is developing that program. In addition to that, over on the ARE community, we posted, it's right at the top, I also put it in my link, which is in the comments. We've got 4 different voiceover artists that we are considering for our next course, and we thought we should ask you guys who you'd like to hear from. I know you spend a lot of time listening to these folks, and so want to make sure that you guys you guys have a say in who we end up hiring for the voiceover work. So it's in the post on our ARI community. Patrick had mentioned it up there, so I'd encourage you to. It just takes about 3 or 4 minutes. Just listen to a couple 30-second clips and tell us which one you like. Let's see, we mentioned Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. These are, of course, channels where we're always posting mock exams. So just to keep yourself fresh, I would encourage you to follow us over there. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and then we're at Black Spectacles on Facebook. We have 2 different referral programs. One is for firms and schools, where if you introduce us to whoever makes the decisions at your office or at your school, and if you guys ultimately do sign up, we can provide you with a $250 gift card as a way of saying thanks. And then we also offer a refer a friend program where you will receive, if you're interested, you can receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership, and then you receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they redeem. So that's our referral program. I want to congratulate Amy Hellman, who is our official winner of a free t-shirt. Amy, it sounds like you got your first or your final exam tomorrow. So, best wishes to you on your exams. And as a way of saying thanks for participating today, you'll be receiving an email asking for your size and shipping information so we can send you your free t-shirt. And again, as a reminder, if you'd like to be eligible to win a free t-shirt, just post a question in the ARI community during the next ARI Live. And ARI Live, I'm sorry, the community is always active. It's not only for ARI Live, so it's a place where our licensed architects have their eyes on the community. If you have any sort of technical questions or even study strategy questions, it's a great place to ask questions, and our team will get you an answer real quick. Also want to mention Licensure Stories, which I spoke about at the top. It's a great podcast where I get to interview recently licensed architects to learn about their struggles and their successes. It's a really good way to kind of, again, learn a little bit from various members of the community and get a little encouragement and some good tips. So I'd encourage you to check out Licensure Stories either on our ARI community or YouTube or any of your podcasting services that you prefer. And lastly, as a thank you for coming, we'd like to offer you a 15% discount off any membership with the code CELIVE15, which is valid until January 14th of 2025. That's the first time. Actually, I guess officially that's the second time I mentioned 2025 today. It's hard to believe it's right around the corner, but indeed it is. So anyways, finally, be sure to stick around for a few minutes today to take our survey and share any suggestions and feedback you might have that we can use to improve ARI Live. I promise we read every word that you write and use your feedback to tune our next episodes. So thanks for tuning in.